How are you today? It's always a pleasure to come down here. And I'm going to put these, if you don't mind. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you 2 weeks ago. But I understand you weren't able to join each other as well. So we're grateful for a reasonably warm and sunny day and to see all of you here today in the oneness that we are. Today's scripture comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12, the Beatitudes. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them. When we talk about Jesus going up the mountain, we know that he is speaking from that consciousness of oneness, of the full awareness of his communion with God. And it is from that consciousness that he is able to give us these lessons. And when he blesses, we know that he blesses from that place of oneness and allows us to open our hearts and our minds to all of the good that is ours already. So the first blessing is, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You know, this one's a little confusing because you think poor in spirit. And so we think of spirit as being the spiritual world, and you don't want to be poor in that. And I'm not here to defend the author of Matthew here, but what is metaphysically being talked about is that they're poor in the human quality, that those things, those situations, the very essence of what we call the earth and our physical nature is not where they are rich. They, in fact, are rich in the Spirit of God. And so being rich allows them to know that the Christ consciousness, that the oneness, that Spirit, is always with us. Because that's the kingdom of heaven inside. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And we know the great comforter is that Spirit, that one Spirit, that entity that provides and lets us know we are whole. So when we are in a situation that is causing us to forget our wholeness, a situation where we might mourn, we can return to our knowledge of the great comforter and know that as beloved children of God, beloved expressions of God, we are whole. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Metaphysically, meek means that is a person who, no matter what is before him or her, greets it with love. No matter what the situation, they respond with love. And so when these people who respond in love, when they inherit, is that they see all of us in love. So when they inherit the earth, they bring forth that love that is inherently within us. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Well, righteousness is nothing other than being in what we might consider a right or a positive or a helpful state of mind. To be able to know that our thoughts are coming from that place of divinity that's already within us. And when we hunger and thirst, we are not remembering that oneness, that wholeness. So when we do remember is when we are filled, because we know that everything we need, everything we could ever want, is already available to us. All we need to do is help bring it forth. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Mercy is an understanding of responding to someone who needs help in what might be called a Christ-like manner. Opening the doors, no matter who they are, what is needed, to be able to respond from our Christness to their Christness. And to be able to know that we are one in that. So when we're able to embrace this truth of God, the truth of who we are, then we can overcome any challenge, and we can help others overcome challenges as well. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Pure in heart, simply meaning that we are filled with the Spirit, with God, with one, with love, with life, with light. And that we are so filled with that we are able to more fully receive all the good that is ours. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. This actually refers with peace of our thoughts, having peaceful thoughts, having calm thoughts, having loving thoughts. And when we have those thoughts, then we are fully aware of our inherent Christ nature, of our connection and communion with God. If you notice, these are all saying basically the same things, but in different words with a little different emphasis. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You know, the idea of being persecuted is just being in a place with people who do not understand where you are, what you believe. And so they question. They may challenge. So when we are able to approach these people, approach a situation which seems ungodly, unspirit-filled, we are able to envision and know that we can create the heaven within us, that goodness that is ours, and we can create all for everyone. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. We're actually going to talk about this a little bit longer in the lesson, but again, the idea of persecution, of coming up against thoughts and words and actions which do not appear to be coming from God. And that when we're able to face those challenges, face those people who disagree with us, we are able to hold our truth and know that we are, if you will, right with God. Only because we acknowledge that. Not because we're different, but because we fully acknowledge that. And when we do, we know that we create that heaven on earth, for we know that heaven is our state of mind, which is good, and love. And as we create it within ourselves, we share it and help create for others. These are the Beatitudes. This is the introduction, if you will, to the Sermon on the Mount. And these Beatitudes are really an opportunity for us to remember who we are and whose we are, because we are part of Spirit. And when we do that, we are able to shape our attitudes and our thoughts and our words and our actions in that loving way and be a real model in today's world, as Jesus was a model in his. So that these Beatitudes remind us to stay in alignment with God. And when we do, we see others in alignment as well. Well, you see me here holding a Bible, which I don't normally do when I'm here. We're going to spend a little time in the Bible. This is very fond memories right before students are ordained. We're given a Bible from our church or a dear one who has supported us in our journey. And so this is one of the many reminders of that day, of that moment, when I, in official terms only, entered the ministry. And yet we know everyone in this room are ministers. So we know in the Bible that there's an Old Testament and a New Testament. And I want to suggest to you that between the Old and the New is the Now Testament. So we're going to be focusing today on those things that come between the past and come before the future. Again, in that now, in that present moment in time. Imelda Shanklin says in her book, What Are You? Time is unknown in the real world. So our whole concept of past, future, and now are elements of time. And time does not inherently have a meaning in the world. I mean, when we were born, we did not, when we were initially coming forth in that human creation, we didn't know anything about time. Not just because we were young, because there is no time in the relative world. The only power that time has is what we make of it. The seconds, the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, the years, those are all man-made. They don't exist in spiritual world because Spirit is in now. So we don't need the past, we don't need the future, and yet somehow we don't always know how to be in now for ourselves. So, because we're not really sure about being in now, we tend to look at the world in terms of the past and the future. Well, this was what I did yesterday, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow, or this is what I'm going to do after the service is over, or what I'm going to do here and there. And so we think about it in these two realms. But there are, in fact, three realms: the past, the future, and the now. We are going to spend some time today looking and knowing a little bit more about the past, the future, and the now through a couple of Bible stories. And some of these are very familiar, and some of them might be a little new. The past. We all have a past. All right? We have a past, and we can see the past, and some people linger in the past, some don't. And the past is represented by a story in Genesis. A story that you are familiar with, no doubt, of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, Sodom and Gomorrah were places, two cities, where there was some illicit behavior. You know, in the 20th century, I'm saying 20th century, in the 60s and the 70s, we might call that sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And that was what was going on in the cities of Sodom and the city of Gomorrah. And this was bothering the people around, and according to the author of Genesis, God was so upset by it that he decided he needed to destroy those two cities in order to purify the area. And before he destroyed it, he sent a couple of angels down to see what was really going on. And those two angels the first person they met was Abraham's nephew named Lot. And they told Lot that we are about to destroy this place because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. That doesn't seem too godly to us, and yet that was a thought in those earlier times, that earlier place in our consciousness, which is what the Old Testament is about. And it's odd for us to think about doing something bad and the need for divine retribution, which is what it's so often called. We don't see that. We don't see that punishment necessary. But we can learn from this story and learn from the discussion about this punishment. So, before the destruction, the angels told Lot to flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, or else you will be consumed. Consumed. Taken, becoming a part of these things that are not seen as good. And so they commanded Lot to take his family and leave, which they did. And as they leave, one person forgets the statement to do not look back. And that's Lot's wife. Lot's wife behind Lot looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, being a pillar of salt is what it says in the story. Now, we don't know anything else about Lot's wife. We don't have any backstory. We don't have a sequel, so we don't know what happens in the future. So all we know is that Lot's wife, who never has a name, by the way, looks back and turns into a pillar of salt. And most of us see that in a very negative light. I don't want to be a pillar of salt. And yet, the Bible doesn't say, the story doesn't say it's bad. It doesn't judge the actions, calling it good or bad. A metaphysical analysis done by Ed Rabel, one of the best metaphysicians that we've had in Unity and a teacher, at the school. He talked about it and he said he's not sure why most of us have assumed that looking back and turning into a pillar of salt is a really bad thing to do. Because it doesn't say that in the Bible. Now, why we assume that is a topic for another lesson. Because it's interesting, that's where most of us turn. But instead, a pillar of salt represents the faculty of remembering, of memory. Think about what salt is used for. It's a preservative. It's been used for centuries to cure meat, to maintain fruit and vegetable in some kind of way. Salt that dries up things so that bacteria and mold can no longer live in that. And a salt that also preserves so we have it for the future. So salt is a very interesting thing, and it really, as a preservative, it helps shape our memory. It helps us remember, and it helps us learn how to use those memories. There are two ways to remember. One is very positive. One is very good, very useful, so that we can use our memories to help us move forward. We can remember what we did in the past and know that either it worked or it didn't work. So if it worked, yeah, let's do it again. And if it didn't work, you're going to find some other way to do it. So it's a way to evaluate so that we can move forward and know what is going to be the best path for us to take. Now, you can use memories in a different way to prevent you from moving forward. That what happened in the past will be the same no matter what happens. We become stuck in that memory, and so we are not able to move forward. And as happens with salt, these memories can crystallize within us. They can block up, if you will, the flow of the goodness, of the Spirit, of the awareness of God, so that we are not able to move productively forward. Now, Ed Rabel talks about this in a fun way. He said, if you found a literal pillar of salt in your front yard, there it is in your front yard, well, what would you do about it? Well, assuming you don't want it there, he's saying we turn the hose to it, dissolving it back to its initial substance of individual grains of salt. So that's what we do if we literally had a pillar of salt right there in front of us. And then he says, if we discover a pillar of salt in our consciousness, what would be the equivalent of using a hose? And that, he says, is using the faculty of renunciation, one of the 12 powers. That faculty that allows us to release the past, to release something that no longer works, to claim the good and to claim what does work for us. Crystallization impedes our spiritual growth. And so using the tools that we have of releasing and claiming, of using the other 11 powers, of work with forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, allows us to release those crystals so that they no longer block our spiritual growth. And when we open the door for our spiritual growth, it can stay that way, and nothing needs to happen. We don't need to live in the past if we know the truth and accept ourselves as spiritual beings. We don't have to go back there because we have God within us. We are aware of that essence within us. So, looking in the past can work for us, but for many of us it doesn't, because it doesn't allow us to really move forward. It doesn't allow us to be in the now so that we're able to take those steps forward. So let's look at the forward, the future. Just as we all have a past, we all have a future. Now, we don't necessarily know what that future is, but we all have one. And we can see that represented in Matthew 10, chapter 10, in a story which you may or may not be familiar with. And it's the place where Jesus is talking with his disciples, and he is telling them to go out in the world and to preach the gospel, to show that heaven is already here within us, to heal the sick, to raise the dead, to do all of those things, to demonstrate that our good is already right here. And he allows us how there's going to be some resistance to people when they hear this message that heaven is right here and right now. And so Jesus is talking about it and seeing and using the analogy of sending lambs out to the wolves. His disciples in a world of people who doubt, who may be angry. And so he warns them that they are likely to be persecuted in this. And he says, when they hand you over, meaning the people who are persecuting them, when they hand you over, do not worry about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you at that time. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. So Jesus knows that he's sending his disciples out into what may be sort of a possible disaster because of the reactions that people will give them because of the message, because the message is so different from what they are used to hearing. And so he tells them that when that happens, don't worry about what you're going to say. Don't worry about it, because God provides those words for you. And so often that happens when we think about things in the future, we start to worry. We start to wonder what it is that's going to happen in the future. We know that the future will come, but what's there? What's ours to receive? If we worry about this, well, we can worry about a lot of things. What's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how's it going to happen, why is it going to happen? And so we just get in a period of anxiety, if you will, when we look to the future and we see or we don't see. And so worry is, in some respects, a sin as we see it, as missing the mark, as stopping God's good and the spiritual development within us from going forth. Now, William Ralph Ing, a Anglican priest, had this to say: worry is interest paid on trouble before it is due. Worry is interest paid on trouble before it is due. Okay, this is what came to my mind when I read this, because it took me a few times to really get a handle on this. In current days, if I'm thinking about, I think I'll buy a book, okay? Not sure whether I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to think about it, and, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. But at that point, I have to pay the sales tax. Now, I haven't walked into the bookstore. I haven't actually decided to buy the book. I haven't bought the book. I haven't read the book, but I'm paying the sales tax up front. That's what he's saying. Worry is paying something up front when we don't know what's going to happen. And it causes us to forget about where we are in this present moment. Eckhart Tolle talks about this, and he says unease, anxiety, tension, stress, and worry, all forms of fear, are caused by too much future and not enough presence. Because the future can be scary. We don't know what's going to happen. And so many of us look at that and say, ooh, what if this happens? Then I have to do this. But if that happens, I have to... And you go through all this worry for something that hasn't happened. So we are then living in the future and staying worried about it. So as Tolle says, we don't have enough presence. And that's where we look at the other state, the now state. And this, you may not be familiar all that with the story, but you are familiar with some of the words. And this is found in 1 Kings chapter 19. And Elijah is told to go up to a mountain so he can see God. He's told to go up to that mountain and see God. Well, we know it's going up into a higher consciousness. But as the story says, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. And so Elijah's there. And he feels a wind, a strong wind, but he knows that God's not there. An earthquake happens, and he knows God's not there. Then there's a fire, and he doesn't see God there either. But instead, after the fire, he found a sound of sheer silence. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of a cave to greet God. Now, we often talk about this sheer silence as this... Can't even think of the words. We use it so often. The still small voice. The still small voice. Well, I actually found there are a whole lot of ways this is talked about in the Bible. I think I managed to find almost all of the English translations of the Bible. And you can see that there are a number of them there. Some of my favorites are a soft whisper of a voice, or whistling of gentle air, sound that is thin and quiet, the sound of a gentle blowing. Now think about all of these phrases and think about what kind of state you have to be in to hear this. I mean, if you're going to really hear sheer silence, you have to stop, right? You can't be moving, you have to stop. You're paying attention to hear the sheer silence. You're in the now moment because you are not paying attention to the past or the future. You are simply being there to hear the sheer silence. So we have to be in the now and the present moment to hear this. Now we know that there is no predestination. Our path is not laid out for us. And so as we walk day by day, step by step, it can be a little unnerving because we don't know necessarily where the next step is going to take us or 10 steps ahead of us, because we're living more spontaneously when we're in the now moment. We are, if you will, improvising as actors might do on a stage in a show where there is no script, and so they make up the words as they go. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this by saying, the present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. If you are attentive. If and when we're attentive, then we can be in that now moment. We're not paying attention to what has happened or what might happen. We are in that now moment, and we can pay attention. The affirmation for the day is, wherever I am now. Wherever I am now. Join me in saying this. Wherever I am now. Again, wherever I am now. Because that's where we live. So we acknowledge the past and we recognize there's a future. But where we really live is right here in this present moment. So we can help ourselves by releasing any stories of the past that no longer serve us, by releasing any anxiety or concerns we have about the future which hasn't yet happened, and instead we can live in the present and live our lives according to the Now Testament. So let's spend a little time in now as we move into meditation. I invite you to be comfortable. Allow yourselves to relax and let the chair support your back. Allow the floor to support your feet. And allow yourself to know that there's no place you need to be except right here in the now. And for this meditation, I invite you to be in now. I want you to think about what that now moment means and experience now by thinking of your breath, by paying attention to whatever your body is doing, to hear what your sounds you're hearing, to using all of the 5 senses to know and to just experience what is now. And if you find yourself drifting, all you need to do is come back to now. So let us join together in this now moment. as we return our awareness to this place and time, we acknowledge that we are in the now, that there is no time except now. There is no place but now, where we are. And so as we come forth, we leave what we just experienced and bring forth the now. We work and live and be in the now. So as we conclude this meditation, we know wherever we are now, wherever I am now,